Good evening. Good evening. This is what, 2 or 3 days after the big storm that really wasn't a big storm. We were lucky we dodged a bullet. It's Tuesday, February 1st, and it's a little bit after 7 o'clock, but we're hustling to get going. This is the official call to order of the Charter Commission, and I welcome all of you here tonight. First of all, I promised Bill Ardinger that I would relay his regrets that he cannot be here tonight. He had a commitment that was made when we had a different schedule, and so now he's, caught where he's caught and couldn't be here. And we welcome back Clint. Thank you very much, my friend. And I cannot believe that you were able to hear us the whole time last.
It was really good.
Unbelievable. Well, you had a good babysitter. Bill took care of you, but you must have stayed right there, glued to.
You guys didn't hear the dog, did you?
No, I didn't hear the dog. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, tonight you may get sick of hearing my voice. I'm already sick of hearing my voice. And there are times when you can and should and must weigh in, because as we go through this process, it is somewhat of a slow process, but we're intent on paying attention to every bit of information we get, both from within the group and from without. We have our esteemed researcher here, Charlie Russell, again. We're going to adopt him pretty soon, because he's so kind, not only to come, but also to send us research materials. The first thing that you all should have tonight is some kind of a packet that on the front says, geographical representation by clusters of wards. And over in the left column, the first date is 1995. Everybody all set? Okay. Last time, and we keep referring it to last time, I did a historical analysis, and the reason it started with 95 is that's the first year that I came to the school board. And the reason it stopped at 2010 down the left column is that was the year just before, or that we initiated the previous one, 2010 and 2011, right, Clint? Mm-hmm. Okay, and so having been either I was at school board until 2008, I was able to know all of the people who were my board colleagues and the ones who were still there when I decided to retire. Unfortunately, I didn't know enough to stay retired. The second column is Ward 4, and this information was brought out, this historical data was brought up because at the time we had a big issue about whether we would have ward voting or at-large voting or some combination of the two. And it still exists this year. In fact, I'm sure that one of our biggest discussions and longest ones will be about ward versus at-large voting. You can see how it worked. In 95, 3, 4, and 1. And there was one vacant from Ward 4. So the interesting thing here for 96 and 97, it still looks like nobody was alive on the east side of the river. Well, that's not exactly so, because there were people here from those wards a few years prior to. I'm sure that you remember the name of Doug Hicks, and then there was another school board president whose name escapes me, but I know he was from that side of the river. And there have been 3 or 4 or 5 other people who preceded these years, 1995. And so it's not that they were the poor stepsister with red hair, it's just that they didn't happen to have as many representatives at the time. That continued through 1998, when you saw a little different pattern begin to emerge. And as you go down through, the year 2001 was a stellar year for wards 5, 6, and 7. But then you began to see an evening out. As a matter of fact, there were some stalwarts from wards 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the names Chris Tague and Betty Hoadley will remind you of the ones who came and stayed and stayed and stayed and stayed. And I refer to them as long-termers, not long haulers. And at the same time, in those years, 2002 to 2010, there was a good representation from wards 8, 9, and 10. And there are names that will be, you'll be reminded of when I say David Emmon, Renwick Wilkes, Mary Trinkley. Not sure about Marty Honigberg. Does he live in 118? Okay. But as you can see, that is, and the reason that I did that is because there had been a myth for years. And I won't say the name of the person who developed the myth, but it was widely accepted without people knowing the data as the only people who were on the Concord School Board were lawyers from Ward 5. And there were people to this day, and I mentioned that to someone who will remain unnamed, who said, I believed it, or I thought it, or I accepted it. But what this data is supposed to show you, it's a Betty Hoadley original research piece from the years 1995 to 2010, and it was presented last time when we worked out the issue of at-large versus ward voting. On the next page, and if you haven't figured out, I'm on agenda item 1, the Hoadley special, and you're going to get sick of hearing from me. Gotta find me the right page. This one has X's on it. Yeah, right. Where'd it go? Can I just see can I just, okay, I'll handle this a little different way. This is the same data that's on item 1, but now it's defined by wards precisely. And you can see where the bulges are and look at that data. What I'm suggesting is that this is the first time most of you have seen it, and but it won't be the last, because when we start talking about ward versus at-large, we may want to go back to historical data and see what it is that it says or does not say to us. The next thing that I'd like to do is go to item 3, which is a paper-clipped item, and underneath it is a chart that you're going to be so lucky as to fill out with me in order for us to see how this works. So, if you look at item 3, excerpts from the Concord School District Charter and the elections, you'll see the pattern. It started in 2012. It was an election that was at large. In 2013, it was a district election. And then again in 2014, a district. And it goes on all the way through to 2018. Actually, we have it a little later than that. And so you'll see twice as many ward results here as you saw at-large results, because they had 2 times every time to have winners. So, without doing names, which I think is kind of tacky and probably a little bit of an invasion of privacy, I'd prefer not to do that. And so if we look at 2013, which was a district voting, you'll see the first person from District A is someone who left after 1 term or before. So I'm putting a mark over in the 3rd column, left after 1 term or earlier, from District 13 winners. And then in District B, there's a name there that you can read, and I'm going to put a mark in column 1 because that person is a long-termer. And I've described a long-termer as anyone who has served 2 or more full terms. Anyone who's lasted more than 6 years deserves to be called a long-termer. And then when we get to 2014, that's a district thing again. And this one is a little tricky because in District A, there was a winner who was a long-termer. And in addition, there was another one from A because of certain circumstance. So you can put them both down if you want to, but I'm not going to let you count them again because they're not 2 people. So we have those 2 long-termers. And then the next one, District B, is also a long-termer. And the odd thing is that I believe that person started in an at-large situation and then changed and flipped back and forth as you legally can. And then for District C, that one has to go in column 3. This is a person who left after one term. Stayed one term, did a lovely job, and then had to move on. At large, I forgot at large 12, I'm sorry. At large, let's go down to the bottom. 3 up from the bottom, at large 2012. The first name is a long-termer. The second name is another long-termer. And the third name should go over in the third column because that's a person who left within the one term and didn't even serve 3 years of it. And so while we're down there, let's look at 2015. That's, am I going too fast? Are we all set? Okay, 2015. That person is first person is a long-termer, but we've already counted him, so you can't have him again. And then the second person, it goes in the second column. That person was defeated after one term. And the third person also was defeated after one term. So we only have 2 marks there. And I might add parenthetically, if you remember the times back in 2015 and 2016, there were difficult times in the district. The times about the Title IX complaints and the sexual assault and all that sort of thing. So it's my private opinion that both of those people lost as a result of the how shall I say, the black eye that the district was wearing in that year. Okay, are we ready to go over to the next page? All right, isn't this fun? We're just following right along like good little...
Hey, can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
What's the punchline here? What are we trying to accomplish?
What's the purpose of...
What are you trying to accomplish with this data?
What I'm trying to accomplish is give you the only historical data that I know exists. Now, the conclusions that you draw from it will be absolutely your own, but we will have all worked from the same data. Does that answer your question, or do you want a little
Not
more?
entirely. I guess the question is the issue in your mind that people who are elected from wards don't stay on the board as long, or?
Well, when we get through, I'll let you add up the totals and you figure that out for yourself.
Okay.
Okay? I mean, and I don't mean to be rude by that. That's why I'm doing this ourselves, so that you can make your own interpretation. There are some reasons why we can't interpret why people get defeated, but I did mention that because it was pretty well accepted that that was a left and a right from the public to the school board. And so we're almost through. Hang in there. 2016 was district, and you can't have that first one as a long-termer. He's already been counted. And you can't have the District B long-termer because that one's already been counted. But then when we get to District C, that person was defeated, stayed the whole term, but was defeated. So that's someone in the second column. When we get to 2018 at large, we have that first person is a long-term, the second one is a long-termer, the third one will go in column 3 because that person has left after.
Betty, I think you skipped 2017. You did,
Yeah, I know, I'm going back. It was, I'm sorry.
Did you
Hang
start
in
in
there.
2017?
Okay, in fact, that's where we'll go right now. 2017, that first person's a long-termer, but the other two will be column 3 because they each left after 3 years. Again, and this is a wonderful question that Bill asked. So why are we doing this? What's the point? The point is that if we're trying to set up a situation where we have experienced, eager, committed, long-term school board members, and I think we probably all could agree to that, is there any situation that makes that more possible? And how you interpret this will be totally up to you. You'll have the data, you'll have the names, you'll have the dates that they were elected. And I think if I had called one of them wrong, someone would have corrected me by now. But did this very carefully. Okay, so now we're to, let me see. 18, okay, 18, we have first person, a long-termer. Second person, a long-termer. Third person for 18 is over in column 3, a person who left after one term. And then we had the unusual situation of having an at-large person, a district person run. We also had a treasurer and a clerk, and those are going to be familiar terms. So hang in there. I believe that we have looked at every year. Now, in the privacy of your home, and you want to make up some tallies here and guess at some reasons, and they will be guesses. I will be the first one to tell you that they will be guesses. And make up your own mind. If there's any kind of data that correlates with at-large and tenure, or is there any kind of data that correlates between ward voting and tenure? But the last thing that I'll do before I give up on this is just mention that last year, in January of '21, just 13 short months ago, the board consisted of the following people. They had 3 people come on the board with no years of experience. They were brand new. They had 1 person come on who had served for just a month of someone else's term. They had 2 people who had 1 year of experience. And they had 1 person with 2 years of experience. There were 2 experienced.
Sorry about that.
Oh, yeah, sure did. Thank you very much. And so there were only 2 experienced board members. And you've heard people speak about the many tasks that are held by school board members, among which would be being thrown in immediately to budget work as soon as you arrive at the school board. The first thing you do is you have some sort of a little hiatus where you learn the ropes, and then the next thing you know, you're in the budget. And then another thing that happens is we need to have experienced people as committee chairman. And so all I'm pointing out is that for whatever reason, and I am not giving you a reason for what happened in January of 2021, I'm only telling you the statistics of the numbers of years of experience that were there in that January when they were starting a budget. So you're all going to say, well, thank heaven she's through with that. Yes, I am. That was the historical data that I wanted to present to you. I've got a couple of other things that I'm doing, and the next page is item number 5, District Policy 110, School Board Member Ethics. I hope you all got it in your packet. Item number 5, with my name all over it because I guess I owned it at the time. And number 5, School Board Ethics. And what I wanted to point out, and they're probably still underlined on your copy, the words represent the entire Concord community. It talks about students, staff, and members of the community. But I, after a number of years on the school board, would take it as meaning even more than that. I think it means every school, every student. And that's one of the things that I think some people don't quite understand. So I'm just pointing that out as a part of school board member ethics, but quite frankly, if they do another great job of policy changes, it almost seems to me like they might want to put the words every student in every school in there as well, because it fulfills the responsibilities. Now, wasn't that page quick? And then, item 6. There are some misconceptions about how parents deal with conflicts or concerns with either teachers or coaches. That's existed forever. It's the way it is. And after about 10 years on the school board, I finally figured out a way to handle it. When people would call me, talking sincerely and unhappily about something that was going on with his or her child on a sports team or in a classroom, and they somehow wanted me to think it. Well, that's no more possible than a councilman fixing a speeding ticket for a speeding citizen in Concord. It's just, this is not the job of the Concord School Board members. And so what I came up with was this. I would tell them as much as I could about how to be their own best advocate. And one time, I had just gotten through some special ed materials, and I had this stuff, chapter and verse, and I told it to the gentleman, who happened to be the child's grandfather, not the child's father. And he was making copious notes, and I said, okay, now the rest of this story is, you go and do this, ask these questions or other questions you feel comfortable about, and in 3 weeks, and I gave him a date, you call me back and let me know how you're doing. Well, guess what? Sometimes you hear from them, and you advise them how to move further through a page like this from school board policy, or you don't hear from them at all. And you know what I figured? They either gave it up or they won. And I couldn't help either situation. So I think that a reading of this policy is probably not a bad thing for us to look at before we start talking about some of the tasks of Concord School Board members and the other things that are not tasks, that are not part of their responsibility. So there's another page gets the dust. And the final page, for whatever it's worth, and I'm not sure it's worth much, out of curiosity, I went and looked up the physical description, the street name of every single existing school, and then checked to see which ward they were in. Well, you can see as well as I do, wards 1 and 2 don't have any Concord schools. Ward 4 doesn't, Ward 6 doesn't, and wards 8 and 9 don't. The schools are concentrated in, up by the golf course, here in Ward 5, in Ward 7, down off South Street, and in Ward 10, 2 buildings that are practically adjoining, over in the wooded area called Broken Ground. So I think this just supports the idea that every school board member is indeed responsible for every school, wherever it's located. And I would hope that people would have the, what's the word I want? Courage, ingenuity, creativity to call anybody who is on the school board, whether they live next door or 8 miles away, and ask a question of them. Whatever question is burning in their mind and hearts, I would hope that they would feel like they had to call, they didn't have to call a certain person, they could call any of the people who were there. In fact, sometimes I get out and I have breakfast with people, and I had breakfast with a former school board member who happened to live on the east side, and he recalled campaigning for his first outing, and evidently he was over on Clinton Street, and I thought, were you lost? And he said, no, I was there on purpose. And I said, and so, well, what happened? Why are you telling me this? He said, well, the gentleman that I was talking to was out working his lawn, and I was talking to him. And the man said, so where do you live? And he told him, he said, what are you doing way over here? And he said, well, because I care about every parent and every kid in every school. And the guy said, well, you've got my vote. If you can come all the way over here to campaign, I'd be happy to vote for you. So we all have our little anecdotes about campaigning, but I'm sure they're going to come up. They're going to come up when we talk about at-large situations and ward situations. And so with that, you're graciously relieved, I guess I can say, to have listened to the old lady for the sorts of things that I figured out and came up with. And so that concludes my presentation. Now, I'm hoping that tonight we can have some people step forward and say they'd like to become an expert or a researcher or a commentator on any issue of any of the motions that are out there, because we want to work on from something other than anecdotal and from the heart. Some things are that, anecdotal and from the heart, but other times there's information to be had. And I'm sure you've had information today from Charlie Russell on the school board stipends. I never had a clue about that. Charlie, thank you very much. And I think the information that he sent us will help us. And so I'm not suggesting you all turn into researchers who are going to write a book about how to do something or how not to do something. But as Bill Arden just suggested, in one of the first times when we talked about motions, how we might develop little subgroups, small people, 1, 2, or 3, 4, who want to present on a particular topic for the edification of the rest of us. So with that, you can cross off item number 2, presentation on historical data. It's done. Are there any questions? I'll take them later when we get back to them. If you need to refer to something later on, you haven't had time to absorb it this time. You don't have to have a question right now, but if you did, I'd certainly try to answer it. So, with that, we turn, as always, we made it a promise to ourselves that we would always have early input from our people who are here today. And the reason tonight, the reason that we must is they can't be sure whether their topic is going to come up tonight or not, and neither do I know right at this moment. But we're always interested in the information. But before we start that, you can sign up if you want to start signing up. The question is, we gave you a lot of paper tonight, and there's more paper there in case you aren't a printer proficient person, or you don't have a printer, or it's a female printer and it only works when it wants to. Do you want to have paper at the meetings so that we can be staring at things simultaneously? Or is that a bore? Do you just want it in the email?
I'd rather paper.
There's a paper. There's a paper.
Yeah.
I'm a paper. Does that answer your question? Okay, and if you don't need the paper, you can always leave it here, and members and community members who might want to pick up spare copies could do it. There's nothing worse than sitting out there and having no clue what it is that the rest of us are looking at, whether school board members looking at their little computers or us looking at paper. So we'll agree, there will be paper available. That makes more work for you, Madam London, but I think that it's well worthwhile. And so, I hate that expression, without further ado. What it means is that what you did first was worth nothing, now let's start something. So I'm not going to say it. I'm going to say, so we're at the point in our agenda, folks, where anyone who would like to give us information or offer opinions, please come forward and do it. There's a sign-up sheet there. Mr. Russell.
Good evening, Charles Russell of Concord. Your earlier history reminded me of Tom Gerber, the longtime publisher's quote.
Oh, he's a neighbor of mine.
Yeah, well, I figured I'd bring it in. We were doing history, and he said, those that don't learn from history are condemned to repeat it. So hopefully the information coming forward in the history is going to help form a charter that's truly fits the needs of the 21st century here. But I speak tonight only on the topic of compensation. I sent some information out, but right now the charter paragraph, page 3, paragraph 6, compensation, member of the Board of Education. Members of the Board of Education shall receive compensation equivalent to an amount received by city councilors for their services. If the Concord School Board is truly autonomous, why is the compensation stipend tied in, and why is it dependent on what another board might decide? So basically, I passed some information around, and if anyone has any questions, but I dug out after I did, like Tom said, he researched 3 or 4 districts, and then I said, so did I, and then I realized, well, let's see, look around, and so I got a 2014, 2015 survey with, even though the number ends at 95, there's about
30-something.
131 or something, I don't know. But anyway, so I summarized some of it there, and basically you can see that, that a lot of places pay a lot of stipends, and some of those districts are pretty small and have much smaller budgets. And then I kind of, on the second one, kind of did a running total of greater than 3,000 a year, et cetera. But it seems to me, I guess, in terms of compensation, or I guess it's called stipends, that it needs to be adjusted. In my research, actually looking for some information, I learned that Bill Glarn was on the school board back in the 1980s, and perhaps at some point someone could ask Bill what was the stipend back in the 80s and whether it has remained the same for that long time period. I was unable to determine when that first came out. The other thing I couldn't do, and perhaps our professor could utilize some of the resources at the community college, is $1,000 isn't worth what it used to be. So, and what was it back then, and what is it now? So whether it's inflation or deflation or whatever you want to call it.
It seemed to be more money to me in 1983, Charlie, than it does today.
I bet.
Well,
If that's
was
any
it
help.
$1,000 at that point?
I'm pretty sure it was,
Yeah, so we got something that's 20th century rates, and we're, a fifth of the way into the 21st century. I think the school board budget right now is in the $90 million range, and the compensation for the 9 board members is $9,000. I'll do the math, since I majored in math. That's 1 cent out of every $100 goes to pay the school board. And I guess I would suggest that perhaps it should be raised to 2 cents, which would bring it up to $2,000. I did speak with a school board member at the polls who indicated that as a single parent, the compensation or the stipend was insufficient to pay a babysitter for the meetings that were attended. So no one runs for school board because they're going to get $1,000 stipend or $2,000. And many of you have served, and I take my hat off for the time and the effort, and you might know better than I what the commitment is on time and finances. But the stipend, which needs to be updated or to current realities, could be an entry barrier for people running. Entry-level barrier. They'd say, well, I could run, but I'm giving my time, but I have to spend more money than I'm getting. So, and nobody's running to certainly get rich to be on the school board. So I guess I would suggest or recommend that paragraph 6 be amended, and it could be done a couple ways. Certainly untie it from the from the city council. I think there's always the old Yankee feeling, you're voting yourself a pay raise. Everybody thinks I'm in it to get rich, and so the council may be reluctant to vote themselves a raise. I don't know how it's set down there. I know other boards will say, between the election and taking of office, say in November or December, we'll address what compensation will be for the subsequent 2 or 3 year terms. But I'd suggest one way you could raise it to a set number in the charter, tie it to a cost of living increase, like whatever Social Security goes up so many percent, and so that's independent. Or you could, which might be a COLA or cost of living, or you could say, we're going to set it at 2,000, and if in your wisdom you decide we should have these charter commissions every 10 years, it can be addressed subsequently in the next 10 years. So that's all I have to say tonight. I thank you for your patience in listening to me, and if there's any questions or I have confused anybody with my summaries, I'm ready to answer any questions.
Again, I want to thank you. Certainly nothing that I did, and I don't consider myself a huge researcher, but I do like to do it. And so, again, not only did I write you a note, I'm saying publicly, thank you very much. This will help us.
Well, I wish you well in your deliberations.
Okay?
Thank you,
Thank
Charlie.
you very much.
Thanks, Charlie.
Sometimes when I wake up at night and I'm thinking about what I'm supposed to be doing or not doing, I think about how this has been a slow process, and I will confess that it has. We spent about 3 meetings, maybe 4, gathering topics, and we came up with 22. And I thought to myself, well, that sounds like it's enough. It seems like we got all the hot spots. We also got some of the things that aren't really relevant and don't really belong. But we put it all together. And then the next thing is there was a joint effort of Lyndon and Bill and myself to put the motions out there last time. And I think that people really responded to that because it gave us a chance to see what the motions were, exactly what topics were there, and an original or a first pass at it in order to get some that were passed and some that were not. And the interesting thing about some that were not is that they have 2 very different interpretations. One is they really didn't pass muster as a good topic to explore. Either that or it was already a topic that we were very happy with and didn't want to touch. Now there's a world of difference between the 2. Well, tonight we're going to work on a little further refinement of it. And as I said, the process is slow but thorough. Hang in there, because before tonight is over, we'll actually be at something, and you can be sure that from now on we will. But we needed to sort of keep, I hate the word massage, but we have to keep massaging these and begin to put them into groups, into categories. And so what we're trying to do is figure out which are the toughest ones, probably approach those first, to organize the results. And even after we vote on every last 22, if we have to, they're not done. Because then they have to go to the writing process. And in talking with Bill today, Bill Ardinger, he wanted you to know that he had already started on some of the work for the preliminary report. For example, the thing, and I hate to make statements that may come back to bite me, but I think that we're all agreed that the items from last time that are no longer necessary and dated and have been superseded should be done away with. They shouldn't be. So, I mean, that's, to me, like a no-brainer. But those things have to be written in a way that the Attorney General, the Secretary of State, and the Commissioner of the DRA
Borrow this for a minute. I didn't keep track.
will approve that preliminary report.
No, that's okay. It's not,
And it
something
has to be
different from what
put
I
in
thought.
a fashion that is ballot ready. And that's an art in and of itself. Something that goes on the ballot, they all have to be phrased a certain way. There's a certain parallelism with them. And indeed,
Yeah, you didn't
they
do it
need to be,
That's okay.
are you in favor of? And then the item will be laid out. As I say, that's an art, and it's one that isn't done in just a few minutes. So even after we, as 9 of us, get through with dealing with every single one of these motions. There's still work to do to find those that are going to be moving on to the next stage, and they need to be in a ballot-ready situation. Last time there were only two. I can't see how we could possibly do it in two this time. No way. But we'll do what we do, and we'll keep sifting and working this down. And the goal is, we're probably going to be as slow as a turtle with arthritis, but we just can't move too fast and jump to conclusions. We have to make sure that we keep the book open, and that even if some of the original topics that had a mixed review, if other information comes to light and we want to re-examine it, we want to be able to pull it back. So, with that in mind, you have something which says motions passed. Mine's all marked up. Do you have that? Mm-hmm. Okay, here we go. I'll explain it as we go. What this will do when we get through is we'll be one step further, or maybe even 2 or 3 steps further than what we accomplished last week. And what we accomplished last week, I thought, was yeoman work. That really did something in my head. That helped me to get organized. And as I say, I hope what we're going to do now may not have the giant steps of last week, but we'll still be moving toward our goal. The motion, and I'm not going to read it to you, to appoint the treasurer of the Concord School District, and motion 2, its companion, the clerk secretary. Is it fair to ask Bill or Kate exactly where we are in that situation right now?
In which situation, Betty?
Motions 1 and 2. Have you actually talked?
We have not.
You have not?
We've done nothing on it since the last meeting, but we will.
Okay, but you have met. Okay, all right. And so, Tom?
I didn't mean to interrupt. So, knowing the language from the last time you folks met that were on the commission before, do you foresee that motions 1 and 2 could be combined?
I would think, well, in terms of a ballot.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, if it were to get that far.
Yeah,
and
Tom, I don't know the answer to that, because it may well be that the Secretary of State requires something different in that, and that you'd have to do it separately.
Okay, so, but it's fair to say that's still underway, okay? And in your wonderful, tender hands. And I speak for all of us, I'm sure, when I say it's very kind of you to take on that, because those are big issues for us. And, you've got to do some, how shall I say, heady work, not too far away in one of the buildings. Clint, a question?
Yes, this is kind of an attorney question, but, and Bill told me one way once, but I still I can't get it a little thick maybe. We have got this charter to amend. And then we go to the voters and they vote on the amended charter. What I don't get is things about amendments to the charter. Where do they come into this whole thing? I think if you pass the charter with the changes we made, that's it. You don't need to vote on other amendments.
The whole point of the city of Concord, or the school district in Concord, owning this charter is that we're the ones who set up the approval or disapproval. And so it has to go to the voters.
Oh, I understand going to the voters.
Okay.
I'm all for that.
Yeah.
It's just that we're talking about now, what should we do about ward voting? And what should we, and let's say we draw up a change that we recommend to this charter.
Yeah.
That's part of the charter. It's not a separate amendment that voters have to vote on. Once we make an adjustment to this charter, the only thing that goes to the voter is the new charter.
The only thing that goes to the voters is a change.
Nope, it's the new charter. You're
Well,
right, it is a change.
Technically, that's correct.
Right.
Right. So there are 3 things we can do with anything in the charter. We can accept it as it is and leave it alone. We can toss it out, eliminate it, or we can change the wording in that particular section. And it has to be limited to just one topic. You can't have 2 topics rolled into one question on the ballot, because there's no if-then. It has to be just a single item.
But Betty, this is the road you're going down that I don't understand. I'd say that we're here as a charter commission to make a recommendation for a charter with changes.
Yep,
The Concord voters have the option of either voting the new charter or not, in which case the old one's in place. This part about adding amendments down the voting thing, so they vote on, do you want ward voting? Do you want this? Do you want that? That can't be what we have to do, but that's why I'm asking the attorney.
Because I think what Clint is saying is that you could run into a situation where if we're going to delete certain things that we think are superfluous at this point, we could have 25 questions on the ballot, and I can't imagine that's what anyone wants.
Horrors.
As opposed to, here's a new charter to replace the old charter,
Right.
which, is one vote.
Right.
He's saying it better than I did.
Okay.
I was wondering the same thing Clint was, actually.
I don't think that's the case. I think the charter is the charter. We vote to change things within the charter.
Mhm.
And members of the public vote on those changes, which when change the charter as a whole.
So we could
Is it-
have 20-something proposed, because, the cleanup work, for example.
Yeah, I don't know how to deal with the cleanup. If that's, since I wasn't on the charter commission the last time, I don't know how that's addressed, but I think, so Bill was, we better wait to see what he says. It feels to me like if we change an issue within the charter, the rest of the charter stays the same, except for if the citizens of Concord vote to make that change, then the charter is reformed with that change in the charter.
Well,
So
let
for
me-
example, if we recommend that the treasurer and the clerk get appointed by the school board as opposed to being voted on, those items, either as one or as two, depending on, would be voted upon. And that, whatever the result of the vote is what goes into the new charter.
That's right. That's my understanding.
And so
Well-
that's like an amendment.
It could
Well,
be
but
25 questions.
Here's
It could be.
another kicker in this whole thing.
okay.
To pass an amendment, you need 60% of the vote.
Where'd you get the 60%?
That's the way the old charter reads.
The charter reads,
When we put-
What old charter? The
When we
current?
put the 60%, ward voting in as a separate line, that needed 60% of the votes to pass. So if we've got 10 items on here, each one of them needs six, I think we need some really good advice on this, because I think we're not doing it right. I'd say we've decided that this charter needs adjustments,
Sure it is.
we've done it, and we'd like the public support of the new charter.
I don't think that's how it works.
Right.
I
Well,
think-
see, that's what I don't know, Bill, and
Yeah.
that's why I'm hoping you guys.
And if it's, look, it should take 60% of the votes to amend the charter.
Oh, I'm all for that, but
Right.
I don't think what we're doing is amending. Well, I think we're changing the charter to make corrections on the original charter that we think might be of value.
Well, let's not spend time on it now.
Okay.
Nobody knows the answer.
okay.
I
Okay.
assume
Good
Mr.
question.
Arden.
But it's a question,
It's
and
a,
we'll,
it's a good question.
Well, thanks for
A
challenging
lawyer would
us.
define that as whether we're restating the charter or we're amending it. It feels to me like
And
we're
that's
amending.
what you guys can find out for us and save us. Good.
So we all have something to think about, and hopefully we'll find an answer that we can relay next week.
Kate, Bill, and
Okay. Moving on, last time we combined motions 10, 11, and 12. My question here is, first of all, maybe silly, but maybe not too silly. In order for us to keep ourselves organized, I think it helps to have numbers. And do you object to having this one called the combined 10 to 12? In other words, still give them those same numbers? It's no big deal, but it's just, so that we'll all be on the same page, on the same motion. Is that okay? And as you can see, this is the one that most of us are looking forward to, as it brings out the at-large versus ward issue, whether it's all of one, all of the other, or some combination of the two. And if we limit it that way, then there are only 4 possibilities, and that's what we will probably even start on tonight with a little bit of good luck. Motion 14. And what I'd like to know, is there anyone who really wants to speak to this? The combined motions 10 through 12, to present an idea and to give us the benefit of your study, your wisdom, your opinion?
Betty, I thought we agreed at the last meeting that at this meeting, we would discuss these issues. We would discuss issues that dealt with the configuration, if you will, of the school board. And it feels to me like, actually, although 10 and 12 are most related, 10 to 12, 14, and 15 are all related to the composition, compensation, and configuration, if you will, of the school
Okay,
board.
yeah.
And I think it's
Hard to separate them.
so.
Well, what I was trying to do is see if we have offers of people who are interested enough to do presentations. If people don't want to do it in small groups, then fine, we can have general discussion, and we can start wherever you want. This person isn't, how shall I say, wedded to any particular procedure, and I know that we're anxious to get at it. The only question is which ones and which come first.
I was under the impression after the last meeting that we were gonna start tackling 10 through 15 tonight.
Okay, 10 through 15 tonight. So we're talking about at-large district, let's see.
Or
the-
14.
Yeah, 14, a ward district residency, and the board stipend. Other ideas or seconding to those?
Well, let me be controversial to start with that. As I think I said at the last meeting, if I were the czar of the system, I think I'd go back to at-large voting. But, I guess I have some concerns about whether, in fact, that system discouraged people from running for the school board or not. It's certainly, I don't put money in that category because, you can run for the school board without spending much money, or you can spend as much money as you want to. I don't think I ever spent more than $100, and, well, I probably did because I bought signs, and that's probably $150 to $200 or $250. But I guess given that more than 60% of the population of the city voted for the change in the charter, that I would want to see some fairly strong evidence that we should go back to the old system before I would recommend it. You collected a lot of information, Betty, and I guess what I'd say about it is this.
Well, I'll say one thing first. Some of it's dated, but dated information is still information.
Sure, and I think, since I'm a lawyer from Ward 5, I guess I heard enough of that. What you can't measure is the desire for people to serve on the school board, the nature of people's interest in community service, is not necessarily divided equally among wards. And you'd also want to know what the population of the wards were and whether, the number of people running in those wards is vastly out of sync. But of course, these numbers don't necessarily show. They show that that there were years between 1997 and 2001 when a lot of the school board members came from Ward 5. I don't know that tells you very much. Because I don't know how many, when these were at-large elections, how many people actually ran in the election? So were people from Ward 5 squeezing out people who were running from Ward 10 or Ward 4? I don't know. I tend to think, particularly with lawyers tend to be interested in public service, I think, sometimes more than others. And sometimes that's because it used to be the rule somewhat among lawyers that you can do well by doing good. The people get to know your name. They when they think of lawyers, they want to think of you. But also, I know in my law firm, it's just the ethic of the law firm that we've been lucky, we serve, and I think there's a simple reason why some people run for the school board, and I can tell you why I did, because I live here. So I don't know that the numbers tell us much of anything about whether certain wards controlled the city. If you go to 2006 to 2008, a large percentage of the board, or a majority of the board, came from wards 9 and 10, where population has grown in the city. I don't doubt that just like many state agencies were controlled by lawyers in town, maybe on a sense of noblesse oblige a little bit, but people like Franklin Hollis ran the Public Utilities Commission as he wanted. So I think school board members are somewhat the same way. I guess that all leads to the fact that I think unless there is some strong reason to go back, I would stay where we are. And I pause on that because I don't think that the desire of people to run for the school board or the wisdom of people who would want to serve on the school board can be divided equally among wards. However, under the current system, you could still have a majority of members of the school board from one ward. You could have the two people who are running from that particular ward grouping, and you could have the three at-large members all from one ward. And I don't know whether there have been times when it's been hard to get a candidate to run from a particular ward grouping, which could be a problem. So that's sort of where I come out on that one. And I also don't think, I'll just add to go to the next one, might as well discuss all of them at once.
Yeah. Sure, go ahead.
Having taken a somewhat conservative view on that, which is that I would want to see some significant reason to change it. I also don't see any particular reason to change the configuration that we've got, to say, well, we'll have 6 at large and 3 from wards, or any combination of that you want. If I recognize that if my resolution were, if I'm not making a motion, but if this were the position that we adopted, there would be no change in the charter, which is okay from my perspective.
Yeah, Nancy, go ahead.
So, some of what you said is what I wanted to reiterate, or to also say, is that if it took 60% of the community to vote for the change from at-large to ward and at-large voting, and we have heard no hue and cry from the community whatsoever to change that, I'm also not really sure on that particular motion in terms of changing going back to having it at large. I'm not sure why we would be trying to fix something that does not appear to be a problem. Now, I completely understand that people don't always pay attention, and that there may be people who do feel some sense of that they would like to see this change, but we have given ample opportunities for people to speak up, to either appear or send in or call or give some kind of input, and we've not heard about this. And so I guess my feeling too is that on that particular one, I would favor keeping things the way they are, which also for me includes changing the size of the board. I'm not sure we did not hear from any school board members that feel currently serving, who feel that that would be, thank goodness, they can't wait to have that happen because the work is so onerous. And so I'm not sure why we would, on 10, 11, and 12, anyway, I'm not sure personally why we would want to change those things.
I'd like to offer another piece of historical data. There was a commission before the last charter commission, and I think both Clint and Bill were on it. It's the one that had the mayor and different people. It's my understanding in reading some of the historical data that Steve Shirtliff, do I have his name right? Former legislator and also city council person, was the one who came up with the ward and at-large procedure for the last one. And so for those of us who were on the last one, that was the first time that this city had seen district-type voting, ward voting, on anything to do with the schools. And so the original commission, the state mandated one, came up with that for the first charter commission, and that's when it was first tried. And so now here we are at the second one. I just wanted you to know, where it came from.
I think it's, my recollection of Betty is a little different, and maybe Clint's, so Clint can correct me on this. I think it was Mike Donovan and Chuck Douglas who were the primary supporters of the ward voting system.
But Douglas wasn't on that commission. He was on last time.
Charlie knows who it was.
Do we?
There was an appointed commission
Right.
to decide whether to give the issue to the voters to have a charter commission done. And I was on, I think the city manager.
That's the one I was on,
Donovan, Douglas, and
Yeah.
some others. So there was one, and then you had the people say, yes, let's have a charter commission, and then they voted a charter commission in, and then
I think that's right, Charlie, but there was also a lot of discussion in that first commission that was put together to decide whether to send the charter back to the city to discuss ward voting, as I recall it, just because I was such an opponent of it.
And then at the last commission, which was the first commission, don't get too confused, the one in 2010-11, both Chuck Douglas and Mr. Donovan were on that commission. And Mr. Donovan was a very strong supporter of the ward system of voting. As I remember his reasons for it, though, they weren't ones that I've heard here at all. He talked about it being a much easier race to run because you only had your 3 or 4 wards to run in, that it would cost a lot less money, and he seemed to have the idea that there was a distinct need by a ward person for their schools. And so that is why I put in and showed you where the schools are located. That doesn't hold water because the schools are not like stop signs. Schools are not on every corner where stop signs are. All streets have to be plowed. And so a lot of the information that came upholding a ward or district voting came from a person who was a municipal lawyer and a municipal officer, the mayor for several years.
What happened is that there was a point in the discussion where we were split right down the middle on an issue.
Oh, you remember that?
Yes, I do remember it. And the ward voting was a compromise that brought everybody on board.
I'm
It
not-
wasn't just one, I mean,
think
the
that's
idea
right.
is, I must say that I was one of the ones that made that as a suggestion,
I remember
just to
that.
try to get consensus so that we could get through. But, yeah, there were people that favored it and people that didn't. You know, Bill wasn't a big fan, but it was what we needed to get the job done.
Well, I didn't remember it as a compromise.
Yeah.
I remembered feeling more like a hostage. And that, those are serious words, and I just so they don't get repeated. But anyway, it was a difficult time, and people were going to withhold their other votes that would have symbolized our unanimity as opposed to trying to find a compromise, yeah.
You were right.
And that was one of the reasons. As a matter of fact, I wasn't strongly, I just thought that the reasons for ward voting, that they're cheaper and easier, and I thought, no, that's not, we don't want a candidate who has come an easy route. I want a candidate who's been tested and really tested. And the other thing is that some of the reasons for the ward voting put forth by some of the people who advocated it didn't seem like they were as relevant as they should be. To me, they did nothing to improve the general stature, if you will, of the Concord School Board. And my job, as I felt then as I do now, is that whatever we can do to ensure that the Concord School Board has a chance to be attractive to the finest minds and the most committed people is what I want to do. I don't know how to do that, and some of it will be guesses, but my choice would be that we, as this group right here, our task is, if we believe in public education and we believe in the Concord School District, then we have to give the Concord School Board members every equipment, every tool, every challenge to win the job and do it right. I know I'm beginning to sound like I should get a soapbox out here and put it up.
Well, I'd
I'm
like to
sorry.
point out that I like Nancy's thoughts. And what I liked about it is because I have mixed feelings about the war, but it's awfully hard to take 60% of our community voted for this, and I don't see a groundswell to change it. And to me, that says something.
Yeah, if I can, I said what I said last week, where I was opposed initially and then came around to it. I won't rehash that. But, to echo, or restate Nancy's thing, again, she said that there hasn't been any comments from, the few comments that we've had have all been one-sided on this, where the board is the right size, is, the general consensus for every comment we've had has been, it's the right size, it's the right distribution, it's the right makeup. I did have a question for the long timers, sorry, but going back to 10 years ago, and yeah, I was here, but I'm just trying to, have there been any instances where any of the individual wards have failed to produce a candidate? Have there been?
That I don't know.
Well,
It
you
don't
does
think
not
so.
appear that was the.
if you look at Betty's, well, I mean, are you asking, Eric, in the ward voting era, has that been?
Yeah, in the last 10 years, yeah.
Or right. because-
Districts, yes, sorry.
There have been a number of elections where people ran unopposed, but there has not been an election where there was no candidate in the
That-
district.
In the
voting.
district.
That was
right.
my question.
Some
is-
wards have not been represented,
Absolutely.
because
Right.
there are 3 wards in
My-
the
my-
district, but,
I misspoke.
no, that's
Um,
okay. It's just-
Districts,
we
not
wanna be clear,
wards.
yeah.
But it's
But-
also true, Eric, as you know, that even in a citywide election, the last time that I ran for the school board, I was unopposed, which is
When it was all at large.
when it was all at large.
Right.
And the
knocking
city
people.
council races this year were largely
Yes.
unopposed.
Yeah, that's right.
Almost every single one was.
Yeah.
So, it's a good question, but it does not appear that
So-
instance happened.
So
Yeah.
we're coming up with generally quality people since this system has been in place. There have been a few people that have lost over the years, but very few at that.
Yeah.
10 years, whatever years, 13 to 18, there's only been a handful that have been voted out, and a couple of them, are putting down to, the mid years scandal thing. Basically, we're reacting or responding to the ideas that we all brainstormed, and we got public input on all that. But the general thing is that it seems to be working. I mean, there's some,
Go ahead, Tom, you don't butt in enough.
Just gotta speak out, Tom.
Get a little aggressive.
So what would it mean if, in real life, if we had the wrong kind of voting going on for our school district in the last 10 years? It would probably equate to, well, we've got a bunch of people from Ward 5 who are really pushing to have this particular thing happen, and the rest of the board members don't have a leg to stand on because there's too many. Yeah, that's an extreme, but we don't, the history, and Bill, you've got history. You were on the board a long time. Clint, you were on the board a long time. I was on the board a long time. Nez was on for a while. I never heard any sort of, hey, I'm from Ward 2, and I really need to have this happen. Or I'm from Ward 6, and I need to have this happen. Or I got a phone call from somebody in Ward 8, and I'm not from Ward 8, so I referred them off to you. Never heard that in my 9.5 years being there. I would have to think you'd have to echo that as well.
I do.
So we have, granted it was 10 years ago, we had 60% of the population who said, let's do it this way. We haven't, as we've heard, had anybody really come forward, and a whole lot of people, and say, whoa, we need to change this, we've got some real problems going on. So, and we haven't heard of any real life instances where it's made a difference. So I would say, let's move it forward and put our efforts elsewhere.
Right. A couple random thoughts that respond or react to a few of the things said. I do think that I think our chairperson made a case for the value of long-term board members, and I don't disagree with that. I think there is real value in having people that understand the way the district works and are committed to it be on the board. But I also think there is value to change at times. And, our district has changed. The composition of the students in the district has changed significantly in the last, 10, 15, 20 years from what it was 10 years ago. And I think making sure that we create a system that creates as much opportunity as possible for the board to, represent our community in the future is important. And I think the district voting allows for that more than maybe an at-large system would. And then I think, there are a lot of reasons why I think the composition of the board has changed significantly since 2015, and some of the, I think you were making some assumptions, but I think it's also important to remember that not only was there a sexual assault scandal that occurred, but then we very quickly, moved into, I think actually before that, there was the kindergarten debate, which was contentious within the city and caused some people to be voted off the board and different people to run. And then we had the sexual assault issue, which, was really hard for the district and led to some changes on the board. And then right after that, we rolled into a pandemic, which I think, has been incredibly difficult for the school district, the administration, the teachers, and the board. They've been in more meetings than over the last, since March 2020, not just because of the normal course of the work they have to do, but as a result of the pandemic, and how are we going to continue to educate kids in this unprecedented time. And I think that naturally led to some attrition on the board, that it was frankly more than anybody would have expected signing up. So I think, you did lose some people who might have in any different time stayed on, just couldn't keep up with that commitment. So I think it's important to remember that some of that change that we saw on the board in 2021 is also the result of, what was happening in the world in that time frame. And then the last thing, on the size of the board, I agree, keeping the composition of it, I think makes sense. I think of a lot of the things we're talking about, it comes back to if it's not broke, don't fix it. But I also, I did serve on a different school board years ago that was much larger. And it, had 12 members that were represented the 12 wards of the city, plus 2 at-large members, plus the mayor. So it was a board of essentially 15 people. And I think, Betty, you were talking about the communication of complaints about school district employees. I think with a larger board, this becomes more problematic. And that was my experience and maybe there was bad practice over a number of years. But I think with a larger board and more representation, people were inclined to try and seek their school board member to resolve issues that really should have gone to teachers, coaches, administrators, as opposed to, the school board members. And that caused the school board to be caught in the weeds all the time instead of setting strategy. So I do worry sometimes if you've got a bigger group, that may be more likely to happen, and the board loses sight of what its real role is.
Thank you.
That's interesting.
Yeah, if I could add something else, it's going to sound a little contradictory to what I said before, but ward voting has nothing, ward selection has nothing to do with the school board. Zero. A member of the school board represents the school district at large. So the fact that you select them, as we've talked about, city council issues are ward-based issues. What's the traffic on my street? What's the parking on the street? What are the potholes in the area that I work in? City school board issues are not. And the fairest and most equitable system would be everybody gets a chance to run. That's the at-large system. But, as I said before, the but to it is, and I would also say that my objection to ward voting was, I don't think the repository of people who want to run for the school board or have the wisdom to run for the school board necessarily is divided by ward. So you certainly can have a situation in which three very strong candidates for the school board want to run from a ward, and you eliminate somebody who could run. They could also run at large if they wanted to. But I just come back to the fact that, having said all that there doesn't seem to be a particular reason to change this. And more to the point, I think the most disappointing thing for me, so I served on the school board for 4 years in the 1980s and 7 years in that 2005, 2013. It was 1 year when I was off the board when we ran against each other, Tom. And is that this is 60% of the budget of the city. It's 60% of your tax bill, and nobody shows up to complain or address the issues. In the 1980s, if you had a school board budget under consideration, you filled the auditorium at the high school with people who wanted to address that. By and large, people are apathetic about the school board. They don't know who's on it, and they don't particularly care. It is one of the most important things. The education of the people in this district and the quality of the schools is one of, now I'm going to be on the soapbox, is incredibly important to the citizens of Concord and incredibly important to me. I'm a product of public education, have a good public education system, and I know the value of it, and public education is under attack in this state. So if ward voting helps get people interested in running for the school board and brings out more people, then I would be very loath to go back to the old system.
I'm gonna just add, I think, as in when we moved to Concord, once we had kids in the district, as a citizen, I didn't understand that every school board member, I immediately, questions about busing, questions on this, whatever it was, looked at who's in my ward, that's who I'm supposed to talk to. So I think there's a knowledge of those of you who have been on the school board, know that you represent everyone, but Joe Citizen doesn't necessarily see that. They see, I'm in this district, I should go probably talk to that person. And there's this feeling that that person, maybe because they live in their area, knows there's a connection. And I think that's an important sort of keeping things smaller, keeping things local. It's important, and I do think that we don't have as much diversity compared to the student population that we have, and we need to make it an opportunity for people to vote and to run, to represent who our district is now, not who our district was 10 years ago. Because the children have changed.
I have an anecdote. I think it was when I retired from the school board after 14 years. That's much too long, much too long. And someone came up to me and said, so you're leaving public life? And I said, yep, I'm gonna do that for sure. We didn't see how long that lasted. But anyway, and the person said to me, well, you've been on the city council for a very long time. I had never been on the city council. I had been a school teacher for 26 years, and then 14 years on the Concord School Board. So what I need to tell you, and again, I'm walking out on thin ice, I'll probably be drowned before the night is over. The general public is not always well informed. They think they are, but they really don't even know the most rudimentary things. And that's why the teaching of civics, a semester course, was required at the state level, because there was such a lack of understanding by people. They don't know about county government, they don't know about state government, they don't know about federal government, they don't know a lot of things. And so when we say we don't hear from anybody, I don't take that as a big sign that people are satisfied. They're just, well, okay, so what? I think that I am, being a very competitive person and an athlete in my old days, I like to think about competition. And I noticed in the last election, in one of the districts, I won't say which one, there were 3 very highly qualified people for school board. And guess what? Only 1 could win, and 2 couldn't. Now, if that had been in a large year, it would have been a whole different scenario. There would be a number of people, and you'd not have to beat just 1 or 2 who come from your district, but you would have to take care of people, counter people from all over the city, people of all different persuasions, locations, and so forth. So I can see a value in ward voting, because I think what it does, if nothing else, it lets people practice. You could run from your ward and your district in a particular year, and the history of people winning a second year after being defeated the first year is very high. So you get into a race like that, and if you're committed and you lost, guess what? If next year happens to be an at-large year, I will guarantee you that you will win, because you will have done the hard work to prepare for it. And so what I'm torn with is this. I like the competition, assuming that you have a number of good quality candidates from around the city. I like the competition of the at-large, but I also like the, how shall I say, ease your way into the matter. Maybe you'll win, maybe you won't, but if you don't win, you're gonna learn a lot so that you could try again in either the district voting again or at large. And so I'm just trying to figure out a way to make a balance between the two, and it'll come back to my altruistic, our job is to find a way to elect the very best people, and that's a task that is impossible. We can't read the future. We don't know where people are going to live. We don't know how strong volunteerism is going to be. There are a lot of things we don't know. But we just need to think about putting everybody at a point where they think, I can do this. And in a way that allows a lot of people, every person, to say, I can do this, would be the way that I would favor, Nancy.
So this is more of a process question now. So everybody, at least who's here, who has spoken about this, what happens next on this particular issue?
Well, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to lay out for a suggestion, is I really would be disappointed if we took a vote tonight. And I'll tell you 2 reasons why. Number one, we're missing a very formidable and wonderful member who would want to be part of the vote.
Yep.
But second of all, if we're going to attack this thing openly next meeting or the next, like we are right now, I want to see this room filled. I want to see this room filled.
Well, I don't think that's going to happen, and I do think we need to keep moving.
Yeah, so we can't control that, Betty, though.
No, but we've got a young lady who helps us an awful lot. And so if it were advertised that is the topic on the agenda for the next 2 meetings, then we'll know whether people care or not. And if they can't come, God bless them, they can have somebody come and read their, if they can't come, they can send an email. But I think that we really do need to advertise that the vote is going to take place at a certain time, and that they need to speak up now or forever hold your peace. That's just my feeling.
I'm okay with postponing the vote and seeing if we can get more people to participate. But I do think it's important to recognize that, at least based on what people said in the room tonight, there's 7 votes against a change. So, I mean,
We'd have to have a lot of
well,
discussion and input to influence, I would think, how people spoke tonight.
the last time I was on the school board, people would say, "You don't listen to us." Well, in many respects, of course, just because we don't accept your viewpoint doesn't mean we haven't listened to you.
Right, of course.
But secondly, we didn't have a whole lot of people to listen to. People didn't come out to the meetings. Of course, if there's a big issue, sometimes people do, and it used to be in the good old days that if you really wanted to get people out to a meeting about the school budget, you would cut, elementary art or a
Right,
sports
use it.
team or something like that, and then
Yeah.
people would come out. So I'm fine with that, Betty, but, and Bill may be very convincing, and we may see something very different at the next meeting. But
I can honestly say I've had this discussion with Bill, and he's not too far removed from where we stand. My feeling is if we truly want people who care about this issue to show up, we give the vote right now that if no further news comes in, these issues are not going to be discussed any further.
well, I don't know what the right answer is on that, but
Lyndon, I'm sorry.
Would you mind if I gave public comment at this point?
Oh, no,
Very brief.
you're entitled to. Yeah, go ahead.
she's going to change chairs,
Yeah,
change hats.
yeah, changing hats. I'm Lyndon Jacket. I live in the community. I work for the district and I work for you. And one of the things that I would like this commission, I really hesitate to bring this up, but I'd like you to keep this in mind prior to actually voting on this issue. And that is that this district has somehow magically avoided the horrible political polarization and politicization of its school board to date. We don't have extremist groups picketing. I don't know how we've managed to avoid that, because we do have people with extreme views of whatever stripe living in our community, but we've avoided that. And so I would ask the commission to look again, to read your charter again, and to think about this in terms of at least ward versus at-large voting, and try your best to inoculate our school board against any extremist groups coming in, funding, and taking over the school board, which I think would be easier to do with district voting, at ward district voting. I'm not saying I'm against it. I'm just asking you, and I hate to do this because we don't want this to be the case. It's not been the case in our community, but it's the case in many communities that are being taken over, whose school boards are, and selectmen groups are being taken over by extremist views that shouldn't really be part of a local discussion, but have become so. And I say this because I work in the education system, and I hear about other communities. I hear about people, administrators and teachers, leaving Merrimack, for example, in droves because their school board seems to have been taken over or in the process of being taken over by people with very extreme views. So I just would ask you to read your charter again, and what can you do to inoculate our community against that? People with special interests representing the entire community. Thank you.
And Lyndon, I think that one of the topics that we're going to do is how a candidate is funded.
Yep.
Very much addresses that issue.
Absolutely.
I don't think ward voting really has much to do with that, but I do think the funding, find out who is backing people, because as Bill said, it used to be a couple $100 is all it took, and you brought it up. But if we start seeing someone coming in with $5,000, we want to know where that $5,000 is.
But if it's easier to win an election because you're running for one district, that's something I'd like you to think about.
I get your point.
But I also would say, Lyndon, and I don't know how this cuts, because Jim Richards made the point in the opposite direction, and I made your point, which is I think it might be easier to control an election within a ward. But there's a counterbalance to that too, which is, if Tracy's point is correct, if the value of ward voting is that people in the ward tend to know the people
Right.
who are running, then I think it's easier to counter that that attempt to influence an election in a ward vote than it would be in a citywide vote. So the reason I ran for the school board in 2005, long after my kids were out of the school system, et cetera, was that there was a group of people running for the school board who largely had a very different view of what the school board should be in the city from the one that at least I had. And Claudia Damon called me up and said, "Bill, would you run for the school board?" Well, that seemed like an easy call at the time. So, yeah, I just don't know what to make of this. I think Clint's point might be the right one. But also, it's up to the school board really to educate the city about what the school board does. And I think, although I don't always agree with everybody who's been on the school board, and I don't always agree with what the school board does, we've been pretty lucky. We've had a very good, we haven't had real dissent within the community about big issues. So,
Betty?
Gina?
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, Gina.
We got a notice from the guy who's recording that people need to speak into their microphone.
okay.
Thank you,
Okay.
Gina.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm going to give you a little quiz right now. The question is, how many school board members does it need in the present charter to bring forth an amendment to its own charter? The answer is,
I think it's 2/3, but
which is 6.
yes.
All right, okay. Now I'll ask you the second question. If you had 2 rounds of ward voting in every 3 years, you would have the potential to have 6 of the people, all the ward people, be elected, and that would be the same number 6. If there's some dreadful thing that happens that is as bad politically as a pandemic is medically, I think you'd have to address the issue of how to amend the charter and perhaps put a higher threshold on it of 7. Now, that's a very conservative, and you probably say, oh my gosh, what did she eat for breakfast? Sour grapes and lemons and everything else. Yeah, it is a very sour and a very dour kind of question, but I just want to remind people that there are other parts of the charter that are integrated and might need to be looked at. I'm not saying that it's going to happen, I'm just saying be alert to the fact that you need to know this charter backwards and forwards and how much it's intertwined in certain places. And just another comment. If this commission were to decide that 9 is the good number, and I'm beginning to feel that's a no-brainer, we've heard it from a number of places, from the superintendent and from present board members, past board members, and so forth. I was going somewhere with this. All right, so you just have to remember that there are only 4 possibilities with 9 members, and one would be to have it fully at large, 3 years of 3 years at large, 3 years of one or district voting, or some combination, 1 and 2 or 2 and 1. And they're down to one of 4 choices if those other things are all true, and that kind of simplifies things. In fact, I think we've been talking around it all tonight. I think I'm hearing little different things, but at least now we have somewhat of a feeling of how people stand. And all I'm saying is, if we agree that 9 is the good number, then there are only 4 possibilities: all at large, all ward and district voting, and then either one of one and two of the other, or two of one and one of the other. And that gets it down to a very simple sort of way. And as conservative as I am, and fought as I did against the district voting last time around, because I thought it was brought forth for the wrong reasons, although I do agree now that some of the reasons are substantial. I still worry about not enough competition, but I, for one, could very easily live with 9 members divided into 3 years, one which was all district or ward voting, and 2 that were at large as a compromise. So you would still retain the ward thing, and yet you'd retain the vigor and the rigor, if you will, of the at large. Next.
So if it helps, and if it helps get the mass of people that you want to see at the next meeting, Betty, I am going to make a motion at the next meeting that we not make any change in the charter as it applies to these issues. 9 members, elected the way they are now, in 3-year stints. So I think that is,
And we could add the clarification that if you live in a ward, if you vote, if you run as a ward candidate, you live in the ward.
But does that mean for the entire time, or only as you get installed, when you win and get?
I don't know. Maybe we
No,
don't want to
see,
throw that.
that's a
one.
separate
issue, I
That's a
think.
separate
I think
issue.
that's a
Let's,
separate issue.
we should.
I withdraw that comment.
Okay.
We can discuss that, but I think
Okay.
it's, there could be a rule of reason on that too, which is if you're 2/3 of the way through your term.
Right.
And if we're true to form, which is the
You
ward
represent
you
the
live
whole-
in has
right.
no relationship to service on the school board, then once you get elected from the ward, I do think that when you are elected, you should be from the
Yeah.
ward, but.
On the
But
day of
let's-
election.
But you're right, let's,
Let's hold on that.
Let's
Let's
hold on that
let's
one.
table that along with the stipend for
Yeah,
school board members
just
until the
focus
next,
on-
until the
yeah.
next meeting. But if it helps get people out, that's the motion I'm gonna make at the next meeting.
okay.
Well,
And I would second it.
well.
You will second it when
You
it's made.
approve of what he's saying. Yeah, no, I saw the glove fly by me as Bill
I think
said
that's a
it, but
good
I think
idea.
it's very, very fair, very open, very honest for him to say that unless we hear differently from people, he intends to lay that out as a motion next time, that we leave the ward and at-large voting as it is. We do not touch it. And therefore, we'll go at all the PR resources we have to get folks to react to that. If there's a groundswell of absolutely no problem, if someone else has other ideas, we can tally that kind of response up.
Okay.
Well, I'll tell you, you just cut out about 3 meetings for us. Thank you, Mr. Glenn. No,
Well,
seriously.
it's worth noting that I was a vociferous opponent of this
Yeah.
process. So, I'm not,
I know.
as I said, in the ideal world, I'd go back, but I don't see a particular reason to do so.
Can I interject one thing here?
Go ahead.
Is 10 years from now, it could all be revisited again, and there's provisions in the charter itself to revisit it in between. If this is the wrong decision, it can be changed again in between. It doesn't have to wait 10 years, it can be revisited, whatever. So it's,
Are you saying we have safeguards?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, nobody's,
Nothing's etched in stone.
yeah.
It's not in the cemetery yet, all
There we
all
go, thank you.
engraved.
And for the record, the next meeting is February 8th, which is next Tuesday. So if that vote's going to come out, that'll be, mark
Well,
your calendar.
then somebody else is gonna have to make the motion, because I'm gonna be in Alabama, so,
Oh, is that right?
yeah,
Seriously?
yeah.
I'll make it.
Okay,
Okay.
okay.
Tracy, you're
Well-
the backup.
Then
You have a pretty good idea of how I would vote on it.
Right.
this has gone beyond my wildest dreams of how much we could accomplish in 45 minutes, or actually about an hour. And so at this point, I'll close the discussion on any of the topics and move to our irregular form of housekeeping, in which case we're on number 5 in the agenda, and we need approval of the minutes of the January 18th meeting, which have been distributed.
So moved.
Second. It's been moved, and there's a second. Who's the second? Okay, all set over there. Are there any, is there any discussion, any errors, omissions, disturbances of any kind? If not, we'll call the vote.
The note-taking is just fabulous. I got to tell you, with all of the discussion and all of the amount of work, it was just terrific, and thank you.
Okay, well then, can we have a formal vote on the acceptance of the minutes of the January 8th? All those in favor, we don't have to do a roll call.
No.
Oh, okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, and those opposed, abstaining, there are none, and therefore, those minutes are approved. I've had information that we probably should go at, perhaps table the recommendation by, about the legal counsel. Is that acceptable from the members? There are just a couple of issues that need to be ironed out. So rather than bring it out and make a mistake and bring it back again and look like we didn't do the job, we're going to just finish it. It's close to there. So with your acceptance, we will put that recommendation for legal counsel a couple of meetings away. Are there any concluding remarks from members about how we should proceed or how we have just proceeded? Go ahead, Nancy.
I guess a question. Since we are hoping to have a huge crowd next week, should we decide what other motions we're going to discuss next week so that
Other people would come to?
Well, I'm just thinking, yeah, I'm a little concerned. This has been a great discussion. I hope we don't have to have this whole discussion again next week. I guess it will depend on the audience, but.
It depends on how many people fill those
Right,
chairs.
but I'm just thinking, should we have a conversation now
About what else we might do?
about what else would be on the agenda so that the promotion of that meeting, whatever promotion we do out in the community, will also say, along with this very important topic, we're going to be talking about X, Y, and Z.
Can I
Okay.
make a recommendation on that? Which
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I think we ought to discuss next week. So I'm not going to be here, so it's easy to
it's
say.
so easy for you to
Uh,
say.
14, 15, and 8 and 16, which again, all surround issues relating to.
Okay, residence, stipend, and,
Yeah,
and
and
financial.
financial disclosure, yeah. That's-
Okay. 14, 15, 16, we'll retain those original numbers, so we won't,
Yeah.
so we
I think
won't
that would
get
be
number
good.
crazy. So not only are we going to address the issue that we have spent some very, very robust discussion on tonight, and I think probably the one that the community is the most interested in, or the most people are interested, whether they're the most interested or not, I don't know. But anyway, we'll call the community's bluff and say, if this is what you want, let us know. If this is what you don't want, let us know. We have several different avenues of your communicating with us. So in addition to the things that we've just discussed, we're going to go ahead with 14, 15, and 16 because they're aligned with it.
Okay,
Wow.
That was easy.
that was good.
Are there any other comments, suggestions, questions from members?
My comment is it's my wife's birthday, and I'd kind of like to
You
adjourn the
wanna get
meeting if we
home.
could.
Well, you can see that I'm working on being done early. I await a motion to adjourn
So moved?
from Nancy, so move. Second?
Second.
Cool.
Second.
Nancy Glan will second that motion.
All those in favor to adjourn will say
Yep.
aye.
Aye.
And let the record show it's 10 minutes early.
Thank you.